We all know what happens at the end of Ruin. Our beloved Roxy turns up to our rescue to save us from the evil mimic. And as we make our escape, we leave Roxy to fight the mimic. Now, because we literally leave Roxy there, it is unknown what actually happens to her. But that is where you're wrong, because I've isolated the sounds during our escape and we can actually hear Roxy and the mimic talking. And believe you me, some of the voice lines blew my mind, because it completely changes the ending and what we thought we knew about Ruin. And before Roxy even comes to our rescue in our legendary mimic scene, we know she was deactivated and stuck under a forklift. But if we look at the environment around her, that'll tell us the complete story we need. We can clearly see a recharge station destroyed. We see a massive blue shipping crate, and the way the forklift is positioned tells us only one thing would have happened, or so we think. Looking at the crate, it clearly looks like it's falling from somewhere, and either the forklift has come out of that blue crate because the doors are open, fallen on Roxy, or the forklift was driven into her. And let's not forget, Roxy is missing her eyes. She could have easier hit something, dislodged the shipping crate from above, it slides, hits the ground in an awkward angle, doors open, forklift comes out, lands on top of Roxy. The environmental storytelling clearly tells us that, but what it doesn't tell us is how Roxy seemingly reactivates and then has the power to remove this forklift off the top of her. And I haven't even got into the secret dialogue with the mimic yet. Now, to me, we don't see animatronics reactivate after they've been deactivated. Look at Glamrock Bonnie, for example. He was completely deactivated. We don't see him just miraculously come back to life and reactivate himself. So that tells me that something else is happening with Roxy. We know she isn't out of power. That isn't an issue. But how would she have turned herself back on? Well, some people might be thinking, well, it was simple. She just completely rebooted herself. Well, that doesn't make sense because we completely deactivated her. And it's not as if we remotely did it. I mean, we physically was there deactivating her with a wrench. It wasn't done via Wi-Fi or by remote. We were physically there deactivating her. So the only way she was going to turn back on is if someone or something was there and physically activated her. And not only that, there's something else we're completely forgetting. She couldn't remove the forklift on her own when she was there. She was struggling. There was no way she was lifting that off. We see that in the game. So how was she then able to do it after she seemingly rebooted herself? There's only two possible explanations here. One is that Roxy seemingly becomes possessed. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on who the soul is or how that's even possible, because I did it in this video here. But in a nutshell, that would then give her the strength, the ability to reboot, and the ability to potentially remove that forklift. And not to mention then go on and do battle with a mimic. And I know, you might be thinking, well, whose soul's inside of it? Well, I don't want to spoil that. I would recommend checking out my other video after this. It has to be the soul to reboot her and then give her the strength to remove the forklift. Or there is another option. She had help. If a soul was inside of her, it would definitely be able to reboot her, no problem, because it's there physically in a sense. But if another person or another entity or animatronic was also there, they could also reboot her and help remove the forklift. So who do we know that would be in the Pizzaplex and be able to help Roxy, or even want to help Roxy? It also ties into another theory I have, such as who is Gregory's friend in Ruin? Because if you remember, at the end of Ruin, Gregory actually says,
My friend has access to the building map.
And then literally says, just follow static direction or instruction.
Just follow instructions.
And if you slow the static down, you can clearly hear a S at the end of the static, which would either mean follow his direction or follow Mike's direction. Now, I know, I just said Mike, and I did a huge theory on that last week, so Mike could still be in the Pizzaplex, and it could still be Freddy. So they would potentially be one of the options in helping remove the forklift off of Roxy. Either that or the spirit. And here's the really interesting bit, because obviously after she would have been rebooted, forklift removed, she seemingly then follows Cassie and rescues her. Why would she be doing that? What's her goal? Unless she was driven by either A, the spirit, or told by Gregory's friend to go and help her. Either way, this is the part where things start to get extremely interesting, because we have obviously Roxy confront the mimic and save Cassie. As Roxy fights the mimic, we make our escape. Where Gregory starts talking to us, we start talking to Gregory. So it's extremely difficult to actually hear what's going on. But believe it or not, there is actually dialogue between Roxy and the mimic. And this blew my mind. Now, the process of isolating voice alone is extremely hard. So a massive thanks to TN Was on Twitter for this. To me, this is absolutely huge, and I'm sure you've picked it up as well. Throughout that, we hear the mimic actually starting to mimic Roxy. Now, at around 7 seconds in, we hear "still too weak, huh?" To me, that sounds like Roxy. But then at 21 seconds in, we hear what presumably sounds like Roxy say, "give up." Give up. That's her original voice line and sounds exactly like her, but then at 26 seconds in, we hear give up again.
Give up.
And that to me is clearly the mimic. The mimic starts literally mimicking Roxy. The mimic then says, you can't win.
You can't.
It's clearly the mimic's voice. And this is the really interesting part because towards the end we hear Roxy roar, then gasp with a huge loud thud. The fighting then stops. We then hear Roxy for the last time say I in a really laboured voice, and then, believe it or not, actually say Cassie. Now, upon first hearing this, I immediately thought she said I lost, but playing it back with my headphones on and listening carefully, she actually says I, then Cassie. But it isn't Roxy who's saying Cassie. It's the mimic. He's mimicking her voice again. If you listen carefully, you can hear it. And further to this, just after we hear her gasp, we hear the sound of like rubble falling and all small rock bounces. To me, that indicates that part of the room they were in or cave collapsed, isolating Roxy in whichever place she is. And further to this, the last word we hear out of all of that dialogue is Cassie. And the first word we hear after the DLC ending, where Cassie in the elevator, is presumably Roxy's voice saying Cassie. To me, that's more than a coincidence. We literally hear the mimic practicing saying Cassie, and then a few minutes later, we hear Roxy saying Cassie? Now looking further into the ending scene, we actually see Mimic pick up Roxy by the head. Roxy is completely battered as is. I mean, she just had a forklift truck on top of her. She's damaged. She hasn't got lots and lots of strength like Monty. Roxy is more built for speed. So there's a chance that she was heavily damaged, potentially on the point of being completely destroyed when the cave-in occurred, meaning she could still be alive, literally buried on the other side of the Mimic. This would then explain why the Mimic stops fighting Roxy and proceeds to chase the protag Cassie to the elevator. Plus, its main directive is to escape. It wants to use that elevator, and the elevator itself uses a Faz wrench. The only person who has a Faz wrench is Cassie. If Cassie escapes, it'll be stuck down there and unable to leave. So its main directive wouldn't be to outright kill Roxy, it'd be to incapacitate her and move on to catching its main objective, Cassie. So I'm sorry to say it, that Cassie at the end of the ruin in the elevator is actually the Mimic. And even in those isolated voice lines, we literally hear the Mimic copying Roxy, proving that the Mimic does mimic Roxy, meaning it wasn't Roxy who was calling out to Cassie, it was actually the Mimic. Or there is one possible explanation and theory which could cover all of this. Let us think for a second. We now have 2 elevators down to an abandoned pizzeria, where Freddy in the original security breach says there's only 1 elevator down. So the fact we see a second elevator seemingly going back up just doesn't seem to make any sense, unless this was a previous elevator taking you down to Sister location. And what if that elevator, when it actually crashes down, doesn't crash back down to the original floor it was at, crashes down further into the Sister location bunker? I mean, the rubble we hear falling during the Mimic and Roxy fight could actually be Roxy falling through the floor. A sinkhole opens up, but unfortunately there's not much evidence for that, and that is just a theory. But further to this, them isolated voice lines definitely change how I view the ending of Ruin. What do you think the Ruin DLC meant? And who helped Roxy reboot and remove the forklift? Was it a spirit, or was it some other entity, another animatronic, or Gregory's friend? I highly recommend checking out my other video on Roxy, because I go into detail I haven't covered in this video. Believe it or not, I've uncovered some pretty shocking evidence. I'm Twisty from Twisted Animatronic. Stay safe out there, superstars.